Hi, folks. It's in my nature to ask lots of questions, and when something doesn't seem to fit, I scratch and I scratch and I scratch. And I think, fortunately for me, I'm not afraid to say when I'm wrong. So I'll make a statement, or I'll postulate a theory, and if someone can come back and go, "No, Jay, that's not how it works," I go, "Thank you." We're at a stage now. I think we're in a dangerous stage where our government has taken us to a point a year down, and it doesn't matter how wrong they are. It doesn't matter how wrong they were. It doesn't matter what they got right or what they got wrong. I can never see them backing down on their mistakes. Further to this, we've got a World Health Organization that got things horribly wrong along the way, and I don't think we'll ever see them backing down and saying we made mistakes. It's just probably the crisis the world's in right now, and the people who are still in charge of these groups. That's where I feel WHO and our president should fire also our Corona Council and all of them. We need new people in there because the guys who are there aren't going to admit mistakes. The guys who made the mistakes aren't going to admit that they're wrong. There's their livelihoods involved, that pays their salaries, that keeps their kids in school, that as scientists that might be their funding. There's all these things involved. So I don't think we're ever going to get an accurate picture. And this is why one thing just keeps on nagging. Now, it's this death rate and it's this COVID illness. And everyone always goes back to excess mortality and everyone always goes back to the R number. And I've seen a lot of calculations and a lot of graphs where they've got a flu graph that goes up and they've got a COVID graph that goes up and all these illnesses. And from what I understand, every year we have an excess mortality, and they tend to base the excess mortality on the driving factor at that time. So if there was a massive flood, or there was a earthquake, or a volcano exploding, that'll be it. If there was a new virus to come along, that obviously say, okay, it was that dominant virus. And we know we've got SARS-CoV-2 that's come around, and that in all likelihood has been the dominant virus. But how much of a dominant virus has it been? Because that R value that everyone's attributing to tracking it, and these will be our actuaries and our statisticians and stuff. If R value is incorrect, then it doesn't matter what your graphs or what we're putting out there. It can't be sound data, because our values are based on PCR tests. And PCR tests are highly inaccurate. Even death rates will be assigned to a PCR test saying they got COVID because the guy gets swabbed and tested and they go, up COVID. But then what about everything else? So where I'm trying to get at is, and I got my board again, because that's the only way I can explain, is this is what I want to know. And just think about this. So we've got two viruses. That's flu and that's SARS-CoV. Now each of these here is not the same as the other. So influenza and the SARS-CoV-2 aren't the same family. They're different. Now, here's our little person. 0.03% of SARS, or people who get exposed to SARS, it's lethal to them. For the most people who get exposed to SARS, the immune system deals with it on different levels, and they most of the time don't even know they're ill. It's a lot of asymptomatic, just into your body, and your body deals with it, but if it's snotty nose, sore throat, then you're done. Similarly, the normal flu virus, over the years, goes into people and you get sick and sore body and everything. And a lot of vulnerable, susceptible, high-risk people also die from the flu virus. Every year, South Africa has, on average, I think it was 6,500 to 10,500 confirmed deaths. I've looked at statistics where in some seasons they put it up to 56,000 flu deaths. And if we look at the same diagnostic criteria between that and we apply them together, in South Africa, our COVID deaths appear lower per annum than our influenza pneumonia. So then I'm saying to myself, if this guy here, Jason over here, gets exposed to SARS, and I'm not a high risk, so my immune system will deal with it, but I can still be exposed to influenza, and let's say I don't deal well with the influenza virus. So that means that flu is still killing over here. So population, we're still going to have our COVID fatalities, we're going to have flu, and there might be other little variant guys out here who are also killing people. Now, in our statistics, this just goes down as the dominant one. We don't test for all of these here. PCR tests pick up the viral fragments. It can also pick up dead viral fragments. So if this guy's had COVID or the SARS-2 and recovered without knowing it, there can still be dead fragments in there that the PCR are picking up because the amplifications of the tests are way too high. WHO has confirmed that now. So again, we've got that there. Now, where I'm going with this is if we have a chart saying that's COVID, that's flu, how do we know that that is all COVID? Because people are going to be exposed to everything still. And as I understand it, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but you can get over that, but you could still die from flu or another virus. And we aren't testing for all of these. So everything is COVID. So that line there, and that's the R value, that value to me would be incorrect. As far as I understand, or as far as I think, you cannot correctly quantify exactly what COVID deaths are or what SARS-CoV-2 deaths are because it's an incorrect PCR or an inaccurate PCR, and everything else that's normally taken hold and it has its fair share of fatalities is just being discounted as long as a viral NA particle pops up there. So that's skewed. Then, when I put it down, and here's winter, and let's say this is our death rate, and then we did that, and we had our winter deaths, which was here, and our winter deaths, by all account, and we have to be realistic here, so don't be angry and say people died and suffered, and those deaths there were a mild death season for sickness, so it was akin to a mild fatality or mortality rate in flu. That amount there. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary to what I've seen on the other graphs. If I'm wrong, please show me the graphs, correct me so I can correct it. And then we had this massive spike here in December. Now, peak mortality, when we're looking at, excess mortality, and I might have the words I'm using, I might be twisting them around, I might not be using them correctly, but you understand what I'm trying to say. Just get the gist of my dumb man language here, because I'm not a smart guy, I just ask questions. So we've got suddenly this huge rise there, and the virus came out last year. The virus has been in South Africa since January. It can be here since November. There have been people who were in Europe last December who got horribly ill in Europe and went to hospital and came back to South Africa. And if this virus is as virulent as they say, contagious as they say, of course we had that there. We might have had deaths here already that just weren't recorded because we weren't recording PCR tests. But again, we had a normal winter pump, and then something went horribly wrong here. Now, all I can think of, if you're looking at like excess mortality and things that are out of the ordinary, and that I would imagine is out of the ordinary for summer, and the only thing that's been implemented here are lockdowns and government intervention, government-driven fear. So when we had lockdowns, suddenly people were trapped in their houses, and I've been through all this in other videos. People were too afraid to go to the doctor. People were too afraid to go for chest pains to be checked, to go get medication. I mean, our local chemists were even panicking because people weren't collecting their chronic meds. They were just hiding away. There's all the stress involved with this. I read a paper last week about isolation and how isolation actually depletes and destroys immune systems and actually is a major contributor to death. So there's all this isolation, there's the financial world falling apart, blood pressures going up, all the drama that goes with lockdown is lockdown. We also suddenly introduced masks. And I'll go back to this again. Even Dr. Fauci, that Fauci guy, he said in one of his papers that the Spanish flu, the second wave was directly attributable to masks being worn, and it was a lot of bacterial pneumonias that were killing the people from the masks. Masks were dirty. Now, some research I've seen here that a lot of these here are pneumonia deaths. Now we're testing for bacterial pneumonias. What sort of pneumonias are they? And again, the sudden rise, it's only following the event of lockdown and government interventions. When we had none, it's sort of, because remember, our hard lockdown was right there to flatten the curve or prepare our health services for 3 weeks. And it carried on. But in South Africa, there wasn't really a lockdown, only in middle class suburbs, some of them. But everyone else pretty much did what they wanted. And it's just these things here. So if we're attributing everything straight to the corona or the SARS-CoV-2 with a test that is inaccurate, I would argue that that is more of a lockdown induced because it came after these interventions here. And this can be a result of people not taking medication, people ignoring symptoms and signs of illness, people not being able to have regular treatments, people not being able to go to doctors and physios and collect medicines, people not being able to eat properly, people being stressed, people being trapped together in poorly ventilated areas. Because all the papers that I've read on masks and the interviews I've watched with scientists is that masks don't stop viral particles from flowing. If you put a mask on, it's going to blow out the side, and this is an aerosol. And gurus really told us it's an aerosol. And what you do for aerosol particles, it's all about ventilation. So old age homes, hospitals, things like that must have incredible ventilation systems where they pump clean air through. People mustn't be stuck in their shacks or their houses or in rooms or locked away into areas. Taxis windows should be wide open. It's not as much about proximity, it's the ventilation. So again, like the beaches, why did they ban that? Because you're out in the open. It's all that wonderful science our government's used. But again, all the government measures that have been put in place here, I believe is driving that. Because that's the only thing that changed. Life was normal. We had an introduction of a sick season, a virus. In that, we would have had our flu deaths, our other deaths. We would have had our SARS-CoV deaths in there. And then suddenly, boom, and they're going, it's a COVID wave. And then they're going to come next year in June, July, and they're saying the third wave. Of course, there's going to be a bloody third wave because every winter we have a set of deaths. But they're only testing for SARS-CoV-2. Now, to me, that skews all the data, and I personally don't believe any of this. The only thing I believe is that government interventions spike in deaths, especially in summer. Summer, there's air. It isn't conducive to a sick season. So all these things here could be heart attacks and bacterial pneumonias driven by masks and other infections and over sanitizing infections and just high stress and people haven't taken meds and people haven't taken HIV medicine, and we need to look at that. So that's why I'm just saying, if anyone out there can give me complete clarity on why all the data and all the graphs that we're working from are actually 100% accurate, because to me they won't be. There are too many other variables in place, and I've always learned garbage in, garbage out. So it doesn't matter how complicated my calculation is, my computation is. If I've got the wrong data going in, it might look fancy on the out, but that out's crap. So if we've got a faulty PCR test and all those numbers here, I can't buy any of this here. And again, just getting back, the only thing that I see different in the history of everything, there wasn't an earthquake, there wasn't a tsunami, there were lockdowns, these clamping downs. That's the only massive influence that we've had that I believe could drive the sudden summer peak in deaths and possible ones we're going to have coming forward. To all the analysts and mathematicians and analytical people, tell me what you think, because I know that everyone gets trapped and we tend to believe what we are comfortable with, and if our calculations and our set formulas have always worked for us, we'll always just turn back to them. But with something like this, with all the false propaganda going around, and there's just so much crap, we all need to just sit back and take a fresh look at this and say, what's going on here? And a lot of those deaths in this peak as well, in that December peak, how many of that are from illnesses that could have been prevented and treated, but we don't have the right equipment, we don't have the right medicine, we don't have facilities, and that's not a COVID problem. That's a government problem, and also incorrect diagnosis. How many people had flus and cysts and septicemias, and they got a ping on a corona test, and they were treated for corona-related things, and they died because that wasn't the case. Or they might have had pneumonia, or they might have had a lesser condition, and they were just overwhelmed and bombarded. And we cannot rule out possible negligence here. And I'm not blaming anyone, because our healthcare workers and our doctors are just so overwhelmed at the moment because they're being fed one line from the government, and they aren't being given access to everything. They don't have the time. They're too overwhelmed and run down. So let's just, as citizens now, actually just sit and pick apart this and say, what's going on here? We've got this lockdown. These are the only external unusual events, and now we've got this spike in January or December, January. It's something to look at and consider. I could be horribly fucking wrong, and then tell me no, but just show me the evidence and why and how, and then let me ask back, but what about this and what about that? And once we get there, then it's not fake news. It's just about exploration. The science is based on people asking questions and throwing different ideas in. So every single time there's a new hypothesis, something, it's our duty to take whatever they say, pick it apart, throw some things new in there, and then they must formulate that, build it up, and put it together. That's how my life has worked. If I have an idea on God, on trees, on anything, I get new evidence, or someone introduces me to a new concept, and I'll take that, I'll throw it all on the table, and I'll build it up and formulate a new idea for myself. And that's what we need to do with this COVID as well. We cannot follow just one set of rules, especially when they're from people who have got so much to lose in admitting that they were wrong. So let's just try this, please. Thanks.